I've always believed that respect isn't something you're born into, it's something you earn. That's how I've lived my entire life, from growing up in a working-class family in Missouri to slowly building my contracting business from the ground up. My name's Rick, I'm 46, and I've never been one for drama or attention. I don't shout. I don't pick fights. I pay my bills, keep my promises, and try to help where I can, especially when it comes to family. But if there's one thing I can't stand, it's being treated like I'm invisible. Like I'm just some walking wallet people can tap into when it's convenient, and forget about the second their hands are full. I met Valerie when I was 34. She was this sharp, confident woman who ran her own accounting firm, and she had a 10-year-old son from her previous marriage named Brandon. Our first few dates were easy, good conversation, plenty of laughter, no red flags. She was divorced, amicably it seemed, and said her ex-husband wasn't much of a father, which to me translated into an opportunity. I didn't have kids of my own, and I was open to the idea. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I just figured if I was going to be in the picture, I'd step up. And I did. Over the years, I went to every parent-teacher night, every school play, every soccer game. I helped him build science fair projects, taught him how to drive, showed him how to patch drywall when he punched a hole in his bedroom wall during one of those dramatic teenage meltdowns. You know, normal stuff. I never forced a relationship on him. I just showed up. Quietly. Consistently. But Brandon never really warmed up to me. At first, I chalked it up to the usual awkward step-parent dynamic. He was 10 when I came into the picture, old enough to remember life before me. Still, I figured if I stayed patient, he'd come around. Valerie kept saying, just give it time. He'll see what you do for him. So I did. Year after year, I kept showing up. Even when it felt thankless. Even when it was clear he only ever saw me as Mom's husband. When Brandon turned 16, he asked Valerie for a car. I offered to match whatever amount she wanted to contribute, and together we bought him a used Honda. He never thanked me. Not once. When he wrecked it 2 years later because he was texting while driving, I paid the deductible on the insurance claim. He never even apologized. Valerie gently told me, "Teenagers, you know how they are." And I did. I kept making excuses for him in my head. Maybe it was awkward. Maybe he didn't know how to express gratitude. I just didn't want to believe he genuinely didn't care. But over the years, it became harder to ignore. When he got into college, a decent state school a few hours away, I was the one who offered to help with tuition. His biological dad was MIA, and Valerie was paying off her own business loans. So I sat Brandon down and told him I'd cover what his scholarships didn't. Not as a loan. Not with strings attached. Just because I believed in him. I still remember his reaction. He nodded, barely made eye contact, then mumbled something like, "Okay, thanks," before heading back upstairs to play Xbox. That was it. No handshake. No hug. Just a grunt. Still, I paid. Every semester. I wrote the checks, reviewed the billing statements, even gave him a card at the start of each school year with a little spending cash. I never told anyone what I spent. Not even Valerie. I wasn't doing it for recognition. I was doing it because I thought, deep down, I was building something. Investing in him. Investing in family. But as the years went on, something inside me started to shift. It was subtle at first. A kind of quiet ache, like something in my chest was slowly bruising. Every time I showed up for him and got nothing in return. No phone call, no visit on Father's Day, not even a text on my birthday. That bruise got darker. But I still kept quiet. Valerie noticed once, I think. One night she touched my arm and said, "You okay?" And I just smiled and said, "Yeah, just tired." Then came graduation. Valerie was over the moon. She bought a new dress, made matching t-shirts for the family. You know the type. Proud college mom, in glitter letters. Brandon had told us he didn't want a huge party afterward, just a low-key thing, with dinner and a few close friends. So Valerie planned this nice little catered event at a park near the campus. Rented a pavilion, booked a taco truck, even brought a cake with his face on it. I drove us up the night before, helped set up tables, strung fairy lights, and made sure the generator worked. All the little behind-the-scenes things no one ever thinks about. That morning, I ironed my shirt, combed my hair, and sat in the folding chair as Brandon's name was called. I clapped, smiled, and watched him accept his diploma in front of hundreds of people. Then came the speeches. Brandon took the mic after the faculty were done, standing up in front of everyone, friends, classmates, a few relatives from his dad's side, and launched into this long-winded thank you. He thanked his mom, his professors, his roommate, even the barista at the campus coffee shop who always knew his order. He thanked his childhood dog, Max, who died 2 years ago. He said, "I wouldn't be the man I am without Max." People laughed, wiped their eyes. Then he looked up at the crowd and said, "And to the people who really made this possible, I see you. You know who you are." That was it. He didn't look at me, didn't mention me, not even a vague stepdad thrown in for courtesy. I sat there in silence, staring at the grass between my shoes. I heard Valerie sniff next to me, clearly moved. I just nodded and clapped like everyone else. My hands felt hollow. That night, we all gathered at the pavilion. I kept a smile on my face, grilled burgers, made small talk. Brandon played host, laughing with his friends, posing for pictures. He didn't say much to me, just passed me once to grab a soda from the cooler and said, "Hey, could you move that chair?" I moved it. Of course I did. Then, as the party wound down and people started packing up, Brandon walked over holding a manila envelope. "Here," he said, handing it to me with this half-smile. "That's the catering invoice. You said you'd take care of that, right?" I blinked. "Excuse me." He shrugged. "It's like $1,300. Mom said you'd probably just pay it, since you handled all the other stuff." I looked down at the envelope, then back up at his face. That same indifferent smirk I'd seen a dozen times before. The kind of look you give someone who doesn't matter, who's just there to do their part, and then get out of the way. I nodded slowly, said nothing, just walked toward the parking lot, envelope in hand. On the way, I passed the trash can near the entrance, paused for a moment, and dropped it right in, and kept walking. That was the moment something broke, not just in how I saw Brandon, but in how I saw myself in this family. And it wasn't the end. Not even close. Let me tell you what happened after that. Because that wasn't even the beginning of the real fallout. That came later, with the phone calls, the money talk, and the one conversation that finally pushed me too far. The fallout from graduation wasn't immediate, at least not on the surface. Valerie didn't notice anything at first. She was too busy cleaning up tinsel and cake boxes, glowing with post-graduation pride. We drove back home the next day, her humming softly as Brandon dozed off in the back seat like a child who'd just won a spelling bee. I didn't say much. I drove, one hand on the wheel, the other on the empty passenger seat between us. There was this strange stillness inside me, like someone had flipped a switch. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just done trying. A few days later, Valerie asked if I had paid the catering bill. I told her no. She looked up from her laptop, blinked. "What do you mean no?" "I mean, I didn't pay it." "But Brandon said." I know what Brandon said. She waited, like I was going to elaborate. I didn't. That was the first time I'd seen her genuinely confused in years. Not upset, just off balance. Like she couldn't compute what I was saying. "Well, I'll just cover it then," she said, and that was that. But something changed after that. She started watching me more closely. Not in an accusatory way. More like she was realizing something had shifted, but couldn't put her finger on it. A week passed. Then 2. I went to work, came home, did the usual. I wasn't cold exactly. Just distant. Brandon didn't call, didn't visit. That wasn't unusual. He'd moved in with some friends across town. Valerie mentioned him occasionally in passing. Brandon's job hunting, Brandon's thinking of taking a gap year. Brandon might move to Austin. I nodded, feigned interest. None of it mattered anymore. He wasn't my problem. But then, the email started. It began with a casual message from Valerie one evening while we were sitting on the couch. She was scrolling her phone, sipping tea. "Hey, babe, Brandon's looking at some certification programs, kind of like a mini MBA thing. It's a few thousand, but it could help him land something better. Just FYI. I didn't respond. She looked over. "Rick," I finally said, "that's nice." She paused. "You think we could help him with that? Just for the first course or two?" I didn't look away from the TV. Come on, Rick. You've always helped." "Yeah, I have." She set her mug down. "What's going on with you?" I muted the TV. "I paid for 4 years of tuition. I gave him a car. I've fed him, housed him, showed up to everything he's ever done, and I've never asked for a single thing in return." And at his graduation, the biggest moment of his life so far, he thanked a dog before he even looked in my direction. Valerie's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't mean anything by that. He was nervous. "No, Val." He meant it. He's never once shown me any respect. Not as a father figure, not even as a person. I don't expect him to call me dad. But I expected something. A thank you. A handshake. A look. Anything. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, "He's just young. He doesn't think about that stuff. He's 22, Val." She didn't respond. That night, we went to bed facing opposite walls. 2 weeks later, I came home to find Brandon in the kitchen. He was shirtless, barefoot, digging through our fridge like he lived there. He looked up, barely acknowledged me. "Hey," he said, mouth full of something cold. "You guys got any more of that organic turkey?" I didn't answer. He pulled out a container, sniffed it, then shrugged and started eating it with his fingers. I walked past him, grabbed a beer from the garage, and sat outside on the porch. A few minutes later, Valerie came out. "He's staying the weekend," she said carefully. "He's got a job interview Monday and wanted to be closer." I just nodded, took a sip. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You've barely said a word to him." "I've barely had a reason." She flinched like I'd slapped her. That night, Brandon took over the living room to watch some loud action movie with his girlfriend, who I didn't even know he was still dating. I stayed upstairs. The next morning, he'd left his laundry on our couch, his wet towel on the bathroom floor, and a sink full of dirty dishes. I cleaned none of it. Then came the real breaking point. It was a Sunday morning. I was in the garage fixing the shelves, something I'd meant to do for months, when Valerie came in holding her phone. "Rick, we need to talk." I wiped my hands on a rag and turned. She looked nervous. "Brandon, he's in a bit of a bind. He just got this job offer, but it's unpaid for the first 3 months. It's this startup thing, you know, equity later, that kind of deal. But he needs a place to stay until then. Just until he gets on his feet." I just stared at her. "He wants to move back in," she said softly. "Just temporarily. I know it's a lot to ask, but..." "No." She blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated. "He's not moving back in. Rick. He's not a kid anymore. He's a grown man who treats me like a doormat. I'm done playing landlord and ATM to someone who can't even fake decency." Valerie looked stunned. Her face flushed. "It's not about you. He's struggling. It is about me. And I'm finally drawing a line." She left the garage in silence. For the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Valerie barely spoke to me. Brandon texted her constantly. I could hear the buzz of her phone nonstop. One night, I came downstairs to get a glass of water and saw her crying at the kitchen table, phone in hand. I didn't ask what was wrong. Then came the final straw, the thing that turned disappointment into betrayal. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I came home early from work, had a job site inspection rescheduled. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a moving truck parked out front. I walked inside and found Brandon directing 2 guys carrying boxes into the guest room. I froze. "What's going on?" Brandon didn't even look up. "Hey man, just getting my stuff moved in." My jaw clenched. I didn't agree to that. He laughed. "Mom said it's cool. Just for a bit." I turned slowly to the kitchen where Valerie was standing, arms crossed, face pale. "Val," I asked, "is this true?" She didn't answer. "Val." She looked away. I felt something snap. Not loud, not explosive. Just a clean, final break. Like a rope that's been fraying for years finally giving out. I turned to the movers. "Stop. Take the boxes out." Brandon stepped forward. "Dude, chill. I'm not your dude. And this isn't your house." He rolled his eyes. "Mom said I could. She doesn't own this house." "I do. It's in my name. Paid off, by the way, by me." Valerie gasped like I'd thrown a grenade. "You're really gonna pull that card?" she said. "I'm done being walked over in my own home." Brandon scoffed. "Whatever. You're just jealous I've got potential." I stared at him, something icy and calm settling in my chest. "You have 5 minutes to get your stuff out of here, or I call the police." "You wouldn't." "Try me." The silence in that moment was thick, heavy. Nobody moved. Then Brandon stormed out, muttering under his breath, followed by the movers. Valerie stood there, trembling. "I can't believe you just did that." I looked her dead in the eye. Believe it. And that was when everything changed. Not just between Brandon and me, but between me and Valerie, too. The battle lines had been drawn, and war was coming. The movers were barely gone 10 minutes when the silence in our house turned sharp. Not loud, but serrated. Like the kind that doesn't cut right away, just waits patiently under the skin. Valerie didn't follow Brandon out. She didn't say another word that night. I made myself a simple dinner, ate in the garage with the door open, and watched the sun set over the neighbor's rusted basketball hoop. The wind was warm. Missouri spring always had that in-between feeling, not cold, not hot, just unsettled, like everything was holding its breath. I slept in the guest room that night, not because she told me to, because I knew what was coming. The next morning, I woke up early, went to work like usual. I didn't leave a note. Didn't need to. When I came home, the master bedroom door was shut. My old side of the closet was empty. I checked the garage. My golf clubs were gone. Just little signs, but enough to know the gears were shifting. On Friday night, Valerie sat me down at the kitchen table. Same place I'd seen her crying days earlier. This time, she wasn't crying. Just distant. Resigned. "We need space," she said, without looking me in the eye. This isn't working." I didn't argue. I just nodded. We both knew it was coming. She moved in with her sister across town by the end of the weekend. Took half the dishes, most of the towels, and her favorite coffee maker. Brandon helped her load the U-Haul. I didn't watch. I stayed in the backyard, sitting in the same busted lawn chair I used to bring to his soccer games. The dogs next door were barking. I didn't mind. The first week alone felt sterile. Not sad. Just empty. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo, just absorbs. I cleaned the fridge, cleared out the junk drawer, vacuumed places that hadn't been touched in years. Not because I was trying to make a fresh start. I just needed to do something that didn't involve thinking. Every room held echoes. That dent in the wall from Brandon's scooter. The corner of the kitchen table where Valerie used to rest her wine glass. The door frame with faint pencil marks from his growth spurts. I could have gotten rid of it all. Repainted. Started over. But I didn't. Not yet. Work kept me afloat. I ran a small but successful contracting business. Renovations, deck builds, roofing, kitchen remodels. My guys were good. Loyal. A couple of them had been with me for over a decade. They didn't ask questions when I started working late. I started taking every job that came in. Big ones, small ones, even some I would have passed on before. It wasn't about the money. It was about motion. Forward motion. Still, some nights hit harder than others. One Thursday in particular, about a month after Valerie left, I came home after a 12-hour drywall job, cracked open a beer, and sat in the living room with the lights off. The house felt like it was watching me. I stared at the family photos still hanging on the wall. There was one in the center. All three of us at a pumpkin patch, Brandon mid-laugh with hay stuck in his hair. I don't know why I hadn't taken it down yet. Maybe I was waiting for it to stop hurting. Maybe I needed it to. I finished the beer and quietly took the frame off the wall. I didn't throw it. I didn't smash the glass. I just opened the back, slid the photo out, and tucked it into a shoebox in the closet. Along with it went 6 others. By Sunday, the walls were bare. The next week, I joined a gym. Nothing fancy, just a 24-hour place near the strip mall. The kind with fluorescent lighting, clanking machines, and a faint smell of old sweat. I hadn't worked out in years. But something about pushing iron, feeling sore in a good way, gave my brain something to chew on. I started sleeping better, eating better, waking up with a little less dread. Then one night, I found an envelope on my doorstep. No stamp, just hand-delivered. My name scrawled in that half-cursive Brandon always used when he was rushing. Inside was a letter. For paragraphs, typed. No, dear Rick. No, sincerely. Just words. He said he was sorry if I ever felt unappreciated. He said he was under pressure, trying to become someone, and that sometimes other people's feelings get lost in the noise. He said he didn't want things to be weird between us, and hoped I'd still support him in whatever way feels comfortable. Support him. Those 2 words stuck in my throat like dry bread. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove 3 hours to the lake that weekend. Just me, a cooler, and a fishing pole. It rained the whole time. I didn't care. I sat under the covered dock, watched the water ripple, and thought about how I'd spent the last decade giving everything, time, money, patience, to people who saw me as a utility. Not a man, not a partner, just a tool. That was the night I started writing my name on things. Literally. I pulled out the deed to the house and made copies. I reviewed the LLC paperwork for my business, updated the operating agreement. I met with my lawyer, a quiet guy named Hank who smelled like old leather and kept a flask in his coat. We rewrote my will. I revised all the beneficiary documents on my insurance for 01k savings accounts. Valerie was removed from everything. And then, I made one final change. I took a chunk of savings, money I'd set aside for Brandon's future and invested it into a new business venture. A second crew, more vehicles, expansion. I'd been toying with the idea for years, always hesitating because of family obligations. Not anymore. Within 3 months, my company grew by 40%. I hired 2 more workers, bought a second property to flip. I got certified in 2 new specialties, one of which put me in line for bigger commercial contracts. I wasn't just rebuilding. I was rising. The best part? No one saw it coming. Valerie texted me once in July. Just a casual, "Hope you're doing well. Brandon got a job in Austin," smiley face, message. I didn't reply. In August, she sent another, "Let's talk sometime. I miss you." I stared at the screen for 5 minutes, then deleted the thread. By fall, I'd redecorated the whole house. Not to erase the past, but to own the present. New furniture, new color scheme, even a new dog, a rescue mutt with 1 floppy ear and a habit of leaning on my leg when he wanted attention. I named him Max 2.0. Sometimes, I'd sit on the porch with him, sipping my coffee while the sun came up, and just breathe. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't angry, but I was different. I'd learned that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure, and I wasn't disappearing anymore. Still, despite the peace I'd carved out, something lingered in the air. A tension that hadn't fully snapped. A knot still tied. Because people like Brandon, and yes, Valerie too, they don't like being told no. They don't like when the quiet guy who always footed the bill suddenly stops playing the game. And when that moment came, when they realized just how much they'd lost, let's just say, they didn't go quietly. It started with a voicemail. Not from Valerie. Not from Brandon. From Valerie's sister, Trish. Now, I've never had any real issue with Trish. She was the polite kind, distant but civil. The type who brought store-bought brownies to family events and said things like, "How's business going?" in the tone of someone who didn't actually care but figured it was the right thing to say. We'd never been close, and after the split, I assumed I'd never hear from her again. But on a chilly October afternoon, I pulled into the driveway, checked my phone, and saw her name sitting there with a little red 1 next to it. Curious, I played the message. "Hey Rick, not sure if I should be calling, but, well, I thought you should know. Brandon's been talking a lot about your business lately. Like, specifics, client names, where your crews are working, what kind of contracts you're taking on." I didn't think much of it at first, but then he mentioned something about stealing work and, I don't know, Rick. He was laughing. Just felt off. "Sorry if I'm overstepping. Thought you'd want to know." I replayed the message twice. My stomach didn't turn. My heart didn't race. I just smiled. Because that was the moment I knew I was right to walk away. And it was also the moment I realized I'd been playing defense for far too long. It was time to set the board. Brandon wasn't just entitled. He was careless. And arrogance combined with carelessness is like leaving a matchbox in a dry forest. Sooner or later, something burns. I started with a little research. Quiet. Clean. I had a few friends in IT, subcontractors I used on bigger renovation projects when the client wanted smart home integrations. One of them, a guy named Leo, owed me a favor for covering a botched install job that nearly lost him his license. I invited him out for wings and a beer, and halfway through our second round, I asked him, "Can you find out if someone's using my business name in any bids? Or sniffing around?" Leo leaned back. "Like fraud? Not yet. But maybe. I just want to know who's watching me." He gave a low whistle. "Let me see what I can dig up." 3 days later, he sent me a screenshot. It was an email exchange. Not directly to me, of course, but between a contractor in Austin and someone posing as an affiliate of my company. The email used a knockoff Gmail account, rj_contractingpartners@gmail.com. Not my domain, not even close. But the person was leveraging my reputation, claiming to partner with Rick Jones Renovations and offering to undercut our pricing in the Austin area. The sender's name? Brandon J. Sloppy. I stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't just some kid being disrespectful. This was someone trying to trade on my name. Someone who thought burning bridges meant nothing if he could walk across the smoke to something better. He didn't realize I'd already doused everything in gasoline. See, what Brandon didn't know was that earlier that summer, during the rebuilding, I'd filed for a trademark. Rick Jones Renovations was now a registered business identity, complete with branding rights, legal protections, and a lawyer named Hank who absolutely loved cease and desist letters. So I made a call. Hank laughed when I told him. Kid really tried that, huh? Used my reputation to try and poach a client. You want me to go loud or quiet? Start quiet. Let's see how he squirms. He sent a formal cease and desist the next morning. Registered mail. Certified. Legalese thick enough to drown in. Then I waited. It took 5 days. On the 6th, my phone rang. It was Valerie. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was tight, clipped, rehearsed. Rick, I just heard from Brandon. He got something in the mail from your lawyer. He's really upset. Says it's all a misunderstanding. Can we please talk? I didn't respond. Instead, I called Hank. Ready to go loud? I asked. He chuckled. Already working on the next step. Because here's the thing. Brandon's little side hustle wasn't just a violation of trademark. It was potentially fraud. He'd signed a name not legally his to use. He'd pitched services he wasn't licensed for. And, cherry on top, he'd failed to register an LLC in Texas, which meant any business he did would legally trace back to him personally. In other words, he had no shield. I wasn't looking to bankrupt him. Not yet. I just wanted him to sweat. While Hank drafted a formal intent to sue notice, I started making calls. Quietly. Strategically. There were contractors in Austin I'd met over the years at expos and conventions, guys I'd had beers with, shared supplier contacts with, even referred clients to when I was overbooked. I called 3 of them. Hey, just a heads up, someone's trying to poach jobs using my name. Kid named Brandon. He's got no license. No insurance. Not affiliated with me in any way. They weren't thrilled to hear it. One had even received a LinkedIn message from him the week before, trying to pitch collaboration. He said you were backing his new venture, one of them told me. Not even close, I said. Then I called the Austin Contractor Association, just to inquire if any complaints had been filed about a Brandon J. doing work without permits. Turns out, yes. A minor one. Shoddy drywall job in a duplex rental. I asked for the client's name and number. Just out of curiosity. Her name was Lisa. A single mom trying to renovate a unit for Airbnb. He said he was with your company, she told me. That you trained him. I'm sorry, I said gently. You were lied to. She paused. I paid him $3,000. He left halfway through the job. Would you be willing to provide a statement? She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I added her statement to Hank's growing folder. Then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I filed a fraud alert with the state licensing board. Again, not to ruin Brandon's life. Just to remind him who he was messing with. Meanwhile, Valerie kept texting. I ignored most of them, but every now and then, I read one just to see how far she was sliding. At first, it was guilt-laced. You've known him since he was 10, Rick. Can't we just sit down like adults? Then defensive. He's not perfect, but neither are you. You can't just destroy his future over one mistake. Then finally, desperate. Please, don't do this. I'll talk to him. He'll stop. Just, please don't escalate. But I wasn't escalating. I was documenting. Every lie. Every invoice. Every time Brandon used my name like it was his inheritance. And while Hank handled the legal pressure, I made another move. A bigger one. I started grooming a replacement. Not for Brandon. For my future. There was a young guy on my crew named Miguel, 27, sharp as a tack, always first to arrive, last to leave. He reminded me of myself at that age. Hungry, focused, humble. I started pulling him into meetings, teaching him the books, giving him more say in project bids. Why me? He asked one afternoon after I handed him partial signing authority on one of our accounts. Because you work like someone who's earned it, I said. And I'm done handing things to people who haven't. He got quiet. Then he smiled. That's when I knew Brandon might have carried my last name on a few documents. But Miguel? He was the one who deserved to carry the legacy. By December, Hank had everything ready. The letters, the evidence, the list of clients, even the fallback civil suit paperwork. But I hadn't pushed the button. Not yet. Because there was one more piece to this setup. One final play that would take everything Brandon valued. Pride, appearances, control, and snap it like brittle glass. And the opportunity came sooner than I expected. A wedding invitation. Not mine. Not Valerie's. Brandon's. He was getting married. And I had just the plan for that. The envelope was thick, the kind that feels important before you even open it. It had gold foil lining and one of those silly wax stamps on the back, like it was hand-delivered from a medieval castle. Inside was an invitation to Brandon and his fiancee's wedding. Her name was Julia. I'd met her once, briefly, tall, blonde, sharp-nosed with the kind of polite smile that never touched her eyes. The kind of woman who only called me Rick when she wanted something. The invite was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Rick Jones. I guess they hadn't updated their mailing list. It was printed on cardstock thicker than most business cards, boasting an elegant vineyard ceremony, followed by a lavish reception at a lakeside lodge upstate. Black tie optional. Guests limited to close family and intimate friends. And at the bottom, in soft gray font, it said, "Gifts welcome, monetary contributions preferred." I set it down on the counter. Then I laughed. Out loud. Valerie hadn't texted me in weeks. The cease and desist letter had shut Brandon up fast, and Hank's formal fraud alert ensured no company in Texas would touch him without digging through the rubble first. But now, after everything, the silence, the disrespect, the manipulation, I was being summoned like some loyal subject to his wedding. Invited to smile, clap, and contribute to a new chapter in the life of the man who tried to ruin mine. And the best part? They thought I'd actually show up. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I got to work. I knew Brandon, maybe better than anyone else at this point. He cared about two things, status and appearance. He wanted success, not through effort, but by looking like he had it. The photos mattered more than the truth. The illusion was the goal. And this wedding? It wasn't about love. It was a performance. So I decided to buy front row seats. The first thing I did was call Lisa, the single mom from Austin whose rental Brandon had butchered. She remembered me immediately. He never paid me back, she told me. He ghosted me after I filed the complaint. I'm filing a small claim suit next month, I said. Want it? Absolutely. I added her to the claim. Hank helped me compile everything. Timestamps, screenshots, client statements. Nothing criminal. Just precise. Clean. Costly. Then I reached out to two of the contractors Brandon had tried to scam. One of them had recorded a phone call. The other forwarded me a fake invoice Brandon sent using a pirated version of QuickBooks. Hank added that to the pile. Next, I had Leo, my IT guy, do a sweep of Brandon's so-called business site. It was gone, of course, taken down the second the letter hit his mailbox. But Leo had already archived it. Screenshots, source code, even the stolen testimonials, which were plagiarized from my Yelp reviews. We assembled a digital binder, over 60 pages, documenting every instance where Brandon had used my company's name for personal gain. It was time for the delivery. I mailed it to the venue. Not to Brandon. Not to Valerie. To Julia's father. I'd done some light digging. His name was Douglas Harper, a retired insurance executive with a reputation for being, shall we say, detail-oriented. The kind of man who still wore cufflinks at breakfast and asked waiters about the sodium content of bottled water. The binder arrived 2 weeks before the wedding. And oh, did it make an impact? I didn't hear anything at first, but the silence felt heavy. Pregnant. Then, 5 days before the wedding, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. There was a pause. Then a voice. Deep, composed, slightly trembling. This is Doug Harper. Hello, sir. You sent me something. Regarding Brandon Jones. Yes. Another pause. A long one. I appreciate your discretion. It was enlightening. He hung up. 3 hours later, I got a text from Valerie. What the hell did you do, Rick? No context. No greeting. Just panic. I didn't respond. But I did hear what happened next, from Trish, of all people, who called me under the pretense of just wanting to understand. Apparently, Julia's father called an emergency meeting with the couple, sat them down in his study like a pair of delinquent teenagers, spread out the binder on the desk, asked Brandon to explain every detail. He couldn't. He tried to lie, of course, said it was a misunderstanding, that I was bitter, trying to ruin his reputation. But Doug wasn't stupid. He didn't just cancel the financial support for the wedding, which he'd been quietly bankrolling. He pulled out completely. No payment for the venue. No catering. No photographer. No honeymoon. Just a cold statement. I won't have a fraud marrying my daughter. Julia, humiliated and furious, didn't take it well. According to Trish, she screamed at Brandon for embarrassing her in front of everyone. And within 48 hours, she moved out of the condo they were renting. The wedding was canceled. Not postponed. Canceled. No refunds. No announcements. Just silence. I'd done nothing illegal. Nothing loud. I'd just handed the truth to someone who cared about it, and let gravity do the rest. Valerie texted me again a week later. A long one this time. Paragraphs. She said she didn't know what Brandon had done, that she'd been blinded by motherly love, that she wished she'd listened to me, that everything had fallen apart. She asked if we could meet, not to reconcile, just to talk. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The leaves were finally turning. Gold. Red. Crisp in the wind. Max 2.0 trotted beside me, his tail wagging like he had no idea the world could be anything but simple and kind. When I got back, I reread her message. Then I deleted it. No anger. No revenge left in the tank. Just closure. My business was thriving. Miguel had taken over more responsibility, and I was starting to step back, just a bit. I'd found a rhythm. Morning workouts. Weekend hikes. Nights reading books I hadn't touched in years. I'd lost a marriage. I'd lost a decade of thankless effort. But I'd gained myself. And that was the only thing worth keeping. Months passed. I never heard from Brandon again. Not a call. Not a letter. Just the faint memory of a boy who once borrowed everything. My tools, my money, my patience, and thought it all came free. One evening, I stood in the backyard, watching the sun dip behind the neighbor's shed, holding a glass of bourbon. I raised it to the silence and whispered, "Thanks for the lesson." Then I turned around and walked back inside.